going to talk to you about the intersection of business and sustainability, because that's what the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise is really about. So I think it's important to understand what that is, how we look at it, and then I'm going to give you some frameworks to think about that space, some of the major questions and issues we're constantly thinking about, no matter what kind of company we're working with or organization we're working with, no matter what sector or what function. And then towards the back end, I've got examples of different things that we've done. Okay? Excellent. All right. So, first of all, I want to make sure everybody's on a similar page. We all know what sustainable development is. Yeah? People, planet, profit, society, economy, environment, the combination of those things. I think we take it for granted nowadays that this word exists. Some people think it's way overused, the idea of sustainability and sustainable development. I'm old school. I haven't seen anything better come up as a descriptor for what our major challenges are. And so I like to think in terms of sustainable development, the intersection of social, environmental, and economic, and how do we do better on those simultaneously, not individually. So if you think about what our issues are in the world, they are really complex. They can be mapped out in really cool ways. I did not do this. I wish I had. I wish I were that creative. But I think it is an exercise I actually do with my students every year to tell them, what are the issues that you think comprise of sustainability? Now, how would you put that into some kind of an image to convey what sustainability really means to people? And here, if you can see the detail of it, which is a little bit hard on this, but it's everything from, climate change out to digital diets. I don't even know what a digital diet is, but it's an issue, right? And it comes back to social, environmental, economic issues. We're all dealing with those things. For me, sustainability is about addressing our biggest challenges. That's how we boil it down with companies. Because if we go back to something like this and talk to companies, people's faces glaze over. And what can I do about that? All right, well, let's step into it in a way that is a little bit more personable. What can a company do? We want to think about big challenges: poverty, ecosystem degradation, climate change. These are the big issues that sort of subsume everything else. And within those, there are specific issues that are very relevant to an organization. That might affect its operations, it affects its employees, it affects its customers. And so we are constantly trying to work with the private sector and say, what's your unique role in addressing sustainability? You can't do everything. What are you bringing to the table? And we do that from the standpoint of, what's government's approach? Government has unique resources, unique activities that it can pursue. Same thing with NGOs. They can approach problem solving in a different way. But then what's the private sector's approach? Now, as you look at those three and you consider those three constituencies, and there are more, academics, multilaterals, we can put others in there, but let's think about government, philanthropy, and business for a second. What's the fundamental difference to you across those three things? Is there anything? And we cold called the business school, so if nobody actually volunteers. Yeah, where they get their funding. So where does government get their funding? Taxes, right. It has the ability to tax. Okay, and where do NGOs get their funding? Donors and gifts. And where do companies get their funding? What's that? Shareholder, yeah, well, primarily you've got to sell something, right? If you can't sell something, shareholders aren't going to give you money. They give you money because they think you're going to grow, and they're going to get their money back. They don't just give you money. They're loaning it to you for a little while, and then they want it back, and they want interest. So that's it. That's the fundamental difference. And yes, we could have a discussion about whether or not companies benefit from social goods, from government, and the interrelationship between these three. And I'm not discounting any of that. But I think it's really important to stop and think about these entities for a second from the standpoint of what have we constructed socially. As far as government gets to operate via taxes, they get to collect their own revenue. Nonprofits have to go out and convince people to give them gifts. And for the most part, what companies have to do is they have to sell a product or a service in order to keep their operations going. And if we lose track of that, then we lose track of the fundamental objective that companies have to meet every single day. This is what people are paid to do, right? But all the time, we're working with organizations where this gets very muddled, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So, if we're going to think about social and environmental issues in a business context, there's lots of ways to do that. I'll talk about that in a second. But sort of to jump to the end, this encapsulates the center in its perspective. It's basically saying take poverty, ecosystem degradation, climate change, any of those other big issues that are out there, and you could see them as a social or environmental issue or a social and environmental problem and stop there. But in a company setting, can you relate that over to that need to make money? Can you address social and environmental issues in some way that is competitive in the marketplace? Because if you can create new business opportunities for the company, then the company gets to grow, which is what it needs to do. It needs to generate revenue. And then there's a fundamental core to addressing those issues in what the company does every single day. And that's easy for me to say, and it's really hard for companies to do for a variety of reasons. But I think this is key. If we're not focused on this over time, then we're not really solving social and environmental problems. Or at least companies don't have a very unique role to play. Because when a company gives money, what does that look like? Looks like an NGO. It's just engaging in philanthropic activity. If it decides to partner up with government and put some money into a project, that looks a lot usually like government aid. And so those things are really good, but they're not necessarily long-lasting because aid and philanthropy dry up and people move on to the next project. And if a company is going to maintain attention on something over time and really move the needle on these big issues, I think they have to be developing products and services that address those problems. That's our position. And it can't just be tweaking what you're already doing because our problems are huge. I'm sure everybody in here is representing a wide range of disciplines here at Cornell, right? And so you know, whether you know birds or soil or whatever it is that you know what the problems are there, you know how much they need to change, and they're not little tweaks that need to be changed. We need to fundamentally change how we approach things. So a company that reduces the size of its product, that's not necessarily addressing climate change. That's not really necessarily moving the needle. Or a company that reduces the amount of CO2 emissions per product. So look at cars, they're getting more efficient, but we're selling more cars. So the overall emissions are still going up. So if the needle's not moving on the social and environmental issues, we're not really addressing those problems. If companies don't have products and services that are addressing those things, companies aren't, in my mind, making a very unique contribution to sustainability that couldn't be made somewhere else. Does that make sense? Questions? Yeah.
I'm a little bit struggling with that concept because, for example, like take big industries and like palm oil or farming businesses and those. Like if they were to like reduce, for example, Nutella, the palm oil content, like we could actually have a big impact on the Amazonian forest. So how does that translate to your concept?
Yeah, but you can't. You need something else instead of palm oil then, right? I mean, if you're the company, that idea of we want. There's different ways companies can approach it. One thing is they could say, there are regulations around palm oil production, we're going to meet those. Another one is, we know people aren't happy that we're contributing to palm oil plantations, so we're going to make sure our palm oil plantations are done in a sustainable way, that they're not, it's not greenfield, it's not new palm oil, there's no forced labor, different things that make their palm oil greener. But then fundamentally, if we just want to remove palm oil from the equation, something else has got to go in there. And is that something else going to be as damaging, more damaging, less damaging than the palm oil? That's what I think we need to think about. I agree. It's an issue. You can reduce palm oil, and it's not to say that's bad, and that's where I'm going to go next. So hold on one second, okay? So this is the problem in business and sustainability, is that it is a cornucopia of ideas and terminologies and initiatives, and some of these might be really familiar. Some of these are older and you may never have heard of, but they were really popular 20 years ago. Today it's circular economy. Yesterday it was industrial ecology. And before that it was life cycle analysis. Those things are all related. We don't necessarily remember that, but they are all related. So these terms kind of fit into that big umbrella of business and sustainability. When you're talking to managers and you want to talk about sustainability, they could throw any of these terms at you, or they could be engaged in any of these things. And when you just look at that list, it's really messy. And again, this is another exercise I'll do with students. Have them generate this list on their own. Won't show them this list, just say, what are the things that you think about in business and sustainability, all the different initiatives that you do. Put them up on a wall. Now organize them in some way. How do you begin to organize this stuff? Because as confusing as it is to look at as just a big, massive list, it's just as confusing to a CEO or a senior manager or a middle manager or even somebody on the line. Can't figure out, what does all this mean? What am I supposed to do? And so that's part of what we try to do with the center and working with organizations, is offer some clarity to it. And this is going to get back to your example. So I think it's really helpful to say, we're in the domain of business and sustainability. We have this term, sustainable development. It's like an empty vessel. You can fill it with your own meaning. There is the Brundtland Commission definition, but at the end of the day, an agency in government is going to look at what their mission is, and they're going to look at the big goals of sustainability, and then they're going to define their mission in terms of those goals. Folks are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. It's kind of similar, right? What do we have now, 17 of them? Plus 100 and some odd subpoints, and probably even more sub-subpoints. It's massive, very confusing. You kind of come into it and pick the ones you like and decide, tie those to your mission or what you're doing, and decide those are the things you're focused on. So here what we want to do is say, well, how does sustainable development really express itself in the private sector? And my argument is there are three ways. So one of them is environmental management. And environmental management would be more compliance-oriented. So here, some of those terms that I had up there earlier, these would be examples of terms that might fit into the environmental management space. ISO 14001, pollution prevention, life cycle analysis. And these things are all oriented towards environmental policy, EH&S, environmental health and safety, the operations of the firm. Those are the people within the organization that tend to deal with those kinds of activities. And so in the palm oil example, right, this is what I meant when I said an organization could take the approach with palm oil and say, are we within regulatory requirements? Either international treaties or laws, local, national laws, or maybe there's just an industry standard that's been established, and are we operating within that? And that's fair game. That's a great activity for a company to do, but fundamentally it defines that notion of sustainability as a regulatory issue. It approaches it in that way. The people who are in those functions, EH&S operations, they sort of see sustainability as a regulatory problem. That's how it gets defined. That's how it expresses itself in their day-to-day jobs. And so that has implications for the kinds of strategies and the tactics that the organization might take. If they see a sustainability issue as a compliance issue, they want to influence what regulations are going to be, what the standards are going to be, and they're going to try to comply with those, or they're going to fight them. And they have, that's where their focus is. And none of that's bad. To me, it's just descriptive. This is what companies will do. I want to stop here for a second. Does this make sense so far? Yeah?
Maybe you're getting to this.
Yep.
In steps, do you have an example of any companies that volunteered sustainability activities, that maybe the change, and they weren't in the business of selling that.
Yeah, I mean, here in this, all over the place, but let's look at one that most people are aware of. Folks remember or know of the India Bhopal disaster when Union Carbide, I forget what gas it was. Do you remember what gas it was? Union Carbide had a gas leak in India, killed thousands of people. Just basically this cloud of poison that killed all kinds of people. And there was a huge outcry globally that was going to put pressure on the chemical industry to change. It was going to change the regulatory environment. And research has been done in multiple domains, but in the management area as well. And it showed that in a way to get ahead of that, the industry went ahead and came up with responsible care. You might have seen responsible care. It's two hands holding like molecules. It's their logo. It's the industry logo. And it's basically saying, if you're going to be a member of the industry association, you have to be a responsible care company. And if you're going to be a responsible care company, then you have to operate with the following baseline standards. And so that very much, in my mind, that was an environmental management response to a problem, right? They're not going into green chemistry. They're not trying to find, low-impact chemicals so that should they leak, they don't kill anybody. They weren't trying to put themselves forward as just a good citizen. The industry as a whole came up with a regulation because they knew they were about to get regulated anyways, right? And you see this a lot. You see organizations doing this in different industries, trying to do that, come up with some baseline standards. And some people will look at them very cynically, and maybe rightly so, depending on the situation, that's companies trying to greenwash. That's companies trying to just put their best foot forward and get regulators off their back. And in some cases, that's probably true. And in other cases, it really is an effort by the industry not to sit back and just let things happen to them that they might not agree with, but to take an active role in saying what makes sense here for us in our business. I don't know, did that answer your question a bit? Okay, all right. If not, come back to it. So, all right. So I want to point out one thing I said here, which was the people in these functions are the ones that are focusing on environmental management. Now, when you think about who makes the critical decisions about what a company does or doesn't do in terms of the products and the services it sells, do you think these folks are the ones making that decision? No, they're not the ones making that decision. So nothing wrong with that. They're playing a role in the organization. It's just peripheral to the central component, the central goal of what the organization is trying to do. These folks are much more task-oriented to ensure that the goals occur. They're not really affecting the strategic orientation of the company, and that's important. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So then another batch of activity that companies tend to do is something that's become much more popular. Most folks know about CSR, corporate social responsibility. But I don't know how deeply folks have thought about it and what it actually means inside of a company. And I'm going to preface this by saying I am not anti-CSR any more than I am anti-environmental management. They are really important functions within the organization, but I want to see them for what they are and what they can accomplish. So with CSR, here's some of the activities that were in that long list before that you could tie back to CSR. It's not clean. We could argue about whether it belongs here or somewhere else. But by and large, these activities tend to include folks from, say, the public relations function, the corporate sustainable, the CSR office. The chief sustainability officer is probably engaged in this. The marketing function will tend to get involved. If an organization has a philanthropic arm, that will tend to be involved. Sometimes your CSR office is really philanthropic in nature. Sometimes they're just partnering with government, doing the kind of aid-based things that we were mentioning earlier. So it's a different constituency, usually within the company. Your more progressive CSR groups these days are not located just within a group, in their own group centrally at corporate headquarters. They're now diffused out within the organization. So if you take a multi-unit business, a multi-business company, pick any multinational that's got 4 or 5 or more business units, and there's going to be, you will have at the corporate head, you'll have a CSO, you probably have a chief sustainability officer, and they'll have a team, but then each of those businesses will probably have somebody who's the chief sustainability officer of that business. So they work in a team to try to diffuse out what are the big issues, what are the material issues for the organization, how do we handle those things. So it's really important, but I'd argue that in their world, sustainability doesn't look like regulation, it looks more like public opinion, and public writ large. I'm not just talking about the public generally. I'm talking about your employees and what do they think of the organization and its approach to sustainability issues, your customers, your suppliers, the communities in which you operate. That's who you're really keeping in mind as you're doing CSR type of activities. And these can range anywhere from a let's, ladle soup at a soup kitchen to clean up our local river, to work with our local school, to doing something much bigger, multi-stakeholder partnerships. But the strategies around CSR activities, again, are a little different than they were for the environmental management. Here, you want to communicate and you want to influence the dialogue. A lot of CSR activities, in my mind, are really about establishing that we're a good organization. We care about the things that you care about. We don't want to pollute the earth. We're not out to mess up society. We're trying to make a dollar, and we're doing it in this way, and we're trying to be as clean as possible. And so we go back to the palm oil example, and I think here it's, we know that palm oil plantations are increasing pressure, the expansion of palm oil plantations are increasing pressure on, say, rainforests or native forests, right? And so, well, we don't want to do that, so we want to make sure that we're sourcing our palm oil in sustainable ways. It's as clean and as green as we can possibly do it, but we're still sourcing palm oil. We need palm oil. We've got to put it in our Nutella, so we're going to go after it anyways, right? So it's just it's a different position. It's not bad. I have no value judgment on it. It's just what it is within the organization. I'm going to stop there for a second. Does that make sense? Questions about that? Yeah.
Maybe approach getting to this, but what comes to mind when I sometimes see a corporation espousing its sustainable activities, I think, oh, they're trying to reduce their profit. They're trying to look better on their financial spreadsheets. Is that the motivation?
They engage in CSR to look better financially?
Into those activities that may be considered,
So I think it's a really I think that's a complex issue, right? I actually thought you were going to go somewhere else with it, which is a lot of people have gotten really cynical these days, if you haven't noticed. And what how I've seen it in my classroom is even students that are really into this space kind of assume that a company is BSing when they start laying out claims, CSR-related claims. Because they do these CSR reports, and yes, they put themselves out. I mean, you're not going to put yourself out in negative light. You're trying to maintain goodwill, which shows up on your balance sheet. There's a value there to your brand name and your brand recognition. You're trying to stay on the right side of people's opinions. We know that younger consumers want to see authenticity in their companies related to social and environmental issues, so they want to see their companies doing good things. That's why companies like Tom Shoes or Vision Spring, where you buy a set of glasses or you buy a shoe and they give a shoe, right? These buy one, get one thing. So I don't think that they're cynical in that way, and they certainly want to tie, especially CSR professionals, really want to tie back to the financial objectives of the company. From what I have experienced in terms of working with organizations, from what I've observed over time, I think there's a limit as to what can be accomplished on that front. Because again, we go back to this, these aren't the central decision makers in the company. These are marketing people and PR, HR. very important functions within the organization, but they aren't determining what we call the product market mix. They aren't determining what the company decides to make and sell, whether it's a product or a service. And so there's a limit as to what you can do influencing from the edges, in my opinion. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah.
So I just want to clarify definitions.
Sure.
So for example, when a company changes itself to decrease its negative impact on environment, society, and etc., it's not corporate social responsibility, it's...
No, it's complex. I'm simplifying here today. It depends on how it's going about doing that. So if it's doing it through what is often called eco-efficiency, it's dematerializing in an incremental way. It's going through continuous improvement. That tends to be related more towards environmental management and CSR, is what my argument is. There's a different framework I could show you that lays out the difference between that risk and cost reduction focus, which is related to some of what you're saying, versus an innovation and discovery orientation, where you're trying to discover new products and services, where you're trying to create something fundamentally different, a palm oil substitute, right? Something just different. Or you're trying to figure out how you can grow palm oil in a way that is fundamentally different from how palm oil is grown now, so that you don't have to expand into these other areas and increasingly degrade the ecosystem. So there's a subtle difference. Sometimes you've got innovation which is very incremental in nature, and sometimes that innovation is really meant to be more effective towards solving the bigger problem, not just dematerializing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, a couple of things that you said during the conversation. People are cynical these days, trying to get people on the same page, even looking at this list of corporate social responsibility. These people are, they talk, they communicate, they bridge this gap. This is all in the outward facing, this is what our company is doing, this is how amazing we are. Where and how do you get this cultural balance? Because internally that has to happen as well. And so even for Cornell, who they took this form that they're extremely socially responsible and environmentally conscious, but then you go into departments and you see, just coffee service, you see K-cups, you see people that are throwing in the trash, you see all of this waste on the basic level that isn't being addressed and that people just don't want to, or it's just not easy, or it's just not normal or comfortable for them. So where is that breakdown when these people are looking internally as well? Because you can say all these things and pitch this amazing thing that we're cutting down on our paper usage, but we've just bought an entire contingent of K-cups for every department in our entire organization. Right. So we've just created that much waste, and though that paper is biodegradable, well, guess what? The K-cups aren't. So where is that balance, and how do they balance that cultural shift within their company and externally as well?
That is a huge struggle, right? No, that's a huge struggle. Look at the business school. Look at Johnson. I shouldn't say the college. Let's just look at Johnson for a second. So here our center is located in Johnson. I like to think we're fairly progressive with what we're thinking. And our recycling alone in that school is so atrocious, I can't understand what to put anything into, like what waste bucket. It doesn't make any sense. Like we have a paper thing with a hole in it, but I thought a can goes in that. But it actually says that's going to the landfill. And there's a compost thing that people are throwing cans in. And so people will approach us, for example, and I think this is kind of a microcosm of what you see in companies. So folks will approach us about what are we going to do about the recycling in this building? And my response to them is, that's a great question. I would love to see that fixed. That is not what I do. That's like an environmental management problem. That is a facilities issue. You need to get your facilities people on that thing. You've got to work with them in the function that they do to hit that. And so, yeah, at some point, all of these functions go up into senior management, and which role within senior management you're playing, and what sustainability, then how that translates down through. That's absolutely establishing goals, establishing clarity of goals and incentives for people and what they should be doing, I think is really important. So I'm 100% behind that, and I think that's what the problem is. the issue for us and what we're trying to do is, and I'm going to go to this third thing for a second, I can come back to that in a minute, but it's this idea of sustainable enterprise. So sustainable enterprise goes back to that initial, one of those early slides I was saying, take those social and environmental issues and look at them as market opportunities. You can believe politically in climate change or not believe in it, whatever your belief is, it doesn't really matter, it's moot to me. We can admit there's a carbon issue, there is carbon increasing in the atmosphere, it is not good. You don't want to think it's human-centered, it's your opinion. Not scientifically based, but you can believe that if you want to. But clearly, there is a need in the marketplace for carbon-free technologies. Companies want it, people are looking for it, municipalities are looking for it. If you can create that carbon-free technology, there's a latent market that you can start to try to tap into. If people are not educated, then ask yourself, is there a way to educate? How could we actually bring education to people? How can we bring access to electricity? Asking these questions in terms of what's the product or service which would allow this organization to try to solve a piece of that problem. That's an innovation, entrepreneurship orientation towards the issue. And those things are the things that general managers, your finance and investment folks, your CEO, your top management team, those are the things they're thinking about. What is the long-term direction of this organization? At some level, you got to think about operations every day. But if you just think about that and you're paying no attention to market trends, you one day wake up and sooner now than later, used to be you could stay on the Fortune 500 for decades, now you can stay on there for less than 10 years. You have to think about what are the trends and how is our company going to be positioned in the future for that trend. I always think about contrails in the sky, right? Those trails that airplanes leave really high up in the atmosphere, and on a really clear blue day you see them crossing each other. I see trends like that you have trends that are coming together in the future somewhere, and your goal as a top manager is to say, that's where the money-making opportunity is going to be. We need to position ourselves to be there in 5 years, in 10 years, in 3 years. And that's a long-term play. You have to invest in things. You can't just decide tomorrow I'm going to go out with a new product or I'm going to have a new service. You have to develop technology. You have to try to commercialize it. You have to pilot test business models. You have to see what the feasibility is. You have to understand what people actually want, what they're interested in, what the issues are. And so that's a long-term development that for the most part companies don't spend enough time and money on. So here the strategies and the tactics are very different. If you don't have in the organization a plan for how you're going to recognize those long-term trends, how are you seeing weak signals that are going to become strong over time? How are you going to see these social and environmental issues as connected to those weak signals that are market opportunities of the future? How are you going to invest in people and technologies and processes and structures to make sure you can deliver the products and services that can address those market needs down the road? If you're not thinking of that, you're not doing sustainable enterprise. And the problem in my mind is, or the challenge is, that these things don't go there. Those are different activities. Those environmental management and CSR activities are very different. So that's why I keep coming back to I like your palm oil question, because it's very exemplary of this kind of problem. You need a new product or service to get away from palm oil. Whether you do something with palm oil or the palm trees or something to alleviate the environmental pressure that's there, or you come up with a complete substitute for it. Until you go there, simply being cleaner, greener palm oil plantation has you in corporate social responsibility. And making sure that you're complying with the laws has you in environmental management. And I don't think we can get to addressing social and environmental issues, those big social and environmental issues, in those two areas alone. You've got to do this innovation and entrepreneurial activity. And so this comes back to the center. We are always pushing towards this. This is sustainability as a business opportunity. And so when a company comes to us and says, yeah, we want to be innovative, we want to use this as a motivation for business and revenue growth, and then we say, well, what are you doing? And they start describing things to us. They're usually describing regulatory responses and things that are good for PR. Well, how's that a business opportunity exactly? Sure, it can, to your question earlier, it can increase goodwill. It can have some impact on the company's performance, but it's at the margins. If you're not having that high growth product or service that's actually moving the company in a different direction, it's not really a fundamental business growth opportunity. And it's only going to maintain top management attention for a limited period of time, and that won't solve our problems. So that is my main thesis today. Is this questions on this? Yeah.
I'm curious about growth. And
Yeah.
I mean, growth is a huge issue for businesses. You
Yeah.
mentioned it a couple times already. But it's also a huge challenge for environmental issues.
Yes.
And I mean, to the extent that if you're doing something more sustainably environmentally friendly and you increase market share, that's positive.
Absolutely.
To the extent that you're motivated to increase your markets, so expand into new markets, that's not so positive in a lot of cases. Even if you're doing something somewhat sustainably, if each action still has a negative net impact.
Right.
Then how do you, so, I mean, you work with businesses all the time. What do you suggest for them? How do you deal with this issue of growth?
We're trying to think of quality over quantity, that there's different ways that growth can occur, and you could be just this ever-expanding, gobbling machine that eats everything and eats all resources indiscriminately. That's problematic. We can get better, we can get more efficient, and that sits in these other two areas, the CSR and the environmental management. We can certainly become more eco-efficient, and so we can grow with less pound per product, and that's better than nothing else. But if we're really going to kind of jump curves and get to something different, we need new products and services that go in a different direction. We can't simply, you can't kind of fundamentally do what you've always been doing it a little greener and still expand, because the social and environmental pressures are just going to keep increasing. I totally agree with that. I don't have a solution for that. I don't know what the product or service should be. We have numerous companies that come to us over the years and say, most recently, the most common one has been utilities. Right? Utilities are, it's not a weak signal, it's a very strong signal that the electricity grid is changing and the market for electricity is changing fundamentally. And so, and they're built on not just fossil fuels, they're built on this model of large growth and centralized control. And they want to know, their question to us is, what should we do to make money? Well, if I could answer that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on the beach somewhere. But what we can work with them on is, what is your process for even trying to get there? We don't have the answers. It's a strategic question with no clear answer. But what's the process that you have? Most companies have no process for trying to figure out even what issues, where there's an opportunity, where can they reduce their impact in a way not incrementally, but where could they have a fundamental impact on the industry and on the environment and on society. They have no process for whittling that down. And so working with them on that process is really important. That bigger question of, fundamentally, is capitalism even consistent with sustainability? That's a slightly different side of me, my environmental resource and policy degree, and I've been in those questions. I think about them constantly. I don't know the answer to that question, but I know that companies simply doing the incremental isn't going to get us to where we need to go. So I want them to work more on pushing on what they do well, which is take innovation entrepreneurship and turn that into a profit-making opportunity. And I want them to do it solely focused on addressing social and environmental issues. It's like the best answer I can come up with.
Yes, just to follow up, to be more grounded. You've mentioned several times when explaining other points that expansion is the goal.
Yeah.
Do you ever work with your clients on questioning that assumption that expansion is important? I mean,
I should say expansion of revenue. I'm not talking about physically the company has to get big. I'm talking about just because of the way you invest in companies and why you invest in companies. You buy stock, all you're doing is placing a bet that the company's value is going to grow over time. I'm talking about value. Do we tie that value then to physical expansion of something? I think that's fundamentally kind of at the heart of it all. What does growth really mean? And I think you can increase value without necessarily consuming everything around you, but I don't have the answer for how that gets done. I just think that's a model we have to move to somehow. And so having companies think a little bit differently, it's the what are you making money on? How can you increase that value? That to me is a much better way to go. Yeah. I don't know if it's a satisfying answer. It's the best I can come up with. If you get a better one, let me know. So I know I've got like 1 minute, 5 minutes? Okay. So let me leave you with a couple other things here. In a business setting, this is the thing that I'm toggling between most of the time with managers. Distinguishing between that social and environmental objective and that business goal, or the social environmental, what did I say? Social environmental mission and the business objective. And what I mean there is that social environmental issue really starts to kind of lean towards what's the philanthropic aid-based goal, that's how people articulate it, versus what's the market-based financial goal. And that's where that word growth comes back, but it's you're growing revenue. How you grow revenue, that's the big question in thinking through. But let me give you a few quick examples that I'll step through. One is some work we did with SC Johnson Company. They make consumer products. So their question, this was a project that they were engaged in with the Gates Foundation. Gates Foundation wants to reduce malaria for at-risk populations. SC Johnson wanted to get involved in that. And that all came from like a lunch between Bill Gates and Fisk Johnson, right? So they have lunch, they decide they're going to commit to this thing. They've both got billion-dollar organizations, so they can afford to make those kinds of decisions. But this is what we're dealing with. We're in Ghana. We're dealing with, these are the doors and windows. So you've got nice screens here and open slats there, or you just completely open. So how do you stop malaria? The social environmental mission is to reduce malaria at the at-risk population. And so if we start to talk to the business managers within the company and say, what are we doing? They start saying, we're doing this. Well, that's not really a business objective. That's a social and environmental objective. The business objective is we have to build some profitable, scalable business that has products or services that are going to somehow, directly or indirectly, reduce that malaria transmission risk. But if we don't get the managers focused on that, build profitable, scalable business model that relies on some kind of a product or a service being sold, then they're focused over here and they can only keep top management, not even top management, middle management, because now you're dealing with designers, you're dealing with brand managers, they have to answer to people, and they have incentives, and if they're not making money, they don't understand what the activity is. It just seems philanthropic to them. It doesn't belong in the business. Why is it here? Give it to the CSR group. It's not our problem. And so what we did was worked with them to develop this business model where they took a bunch of products and services that actually had to do with a clean home and get people involved in selling those products and services at a household level. Why a clean home? That had nothing to do with malaria. Well, because when we went to the field and we talked to people about how much would you be willing to pay not to have malaria, and people laughed at us. Everybody has malaria. Why would I pay not to have, everybody has it. It's just, that's life. And so the idea of expending money on something you're going to get anyways didn't make any sense to them. A marketing campaign to reduce malaria, this product will reduce, it wasn't really meaningful. Plus, if they get a free bed net if they wanted it, they just didn't see the reason for it. But what they were really interested in is the health and safety of their family. That's a messaging that really resonated with them. So when we bundle a set of goods together to say this will clean your home and these products have within them things that are going to kill or repel mosquitoes, now that's a way to get products and services to people's hands, getting used in an affordable way, and that has an economic component built in to rejuvenate itself over time. Doesn't necessarily answer the question you were asking about growth, right? But it starts to deal with that problem in a slightly different way. Another one here I'll share, and then, yeah?
Can you maybe comment on how did it work? Did it actually reduce the malaria?
Hard to say. That was a big issue, right? Because it was hard to distinguish. There were so many factors contributing to malaria. Yeah, so they were trying to figure out, well, how do we measure this? So we got this business. But there were bigger problems with that model in that the business model itself over time didn't work out. It wasn't financially viable. They couldn't kind of come up with a sales model that would work. But I'm less interested that it worked in the short term. I'm more interested that the company went about trying something different and thought about how do you get at this from a business perspective. But it's a great question, and a lot of efforts bump into this problem. Malaria is caused by so many things. By the time you get to this level, is that the thing that's going to make the difference? Maybe not. Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle, right? It's what the company can control. One other one here I'll give you is this Cheetah Conservation Fund. So this is an NGO based in Namibia. Their social environmental mission is to conserve cheetah population in Namibia. But their business objective is to create a competitive product from an invasive thorn bush that overruns cheetah habitat and can blind them when the cheetahs run through, or it just makes it impossible for the cheetah to hunt. So when they came to us, they already had this product. It's something called a bush block. And it looks like a fake log you would buy in a store, right? You put it in a fireplace. And the label on it is a cheetah. And it says bush block. That's all it is. And so kind of some people looked at it and go, is it made of cheetah? I can't understand. What is this thing? And so their problem was not that they didn't have the product. The problem was the product wasn't selling. And the whole idea was sell the product. You're using the thorn bush. So there's an economic incentive for people to remove it. There's an economic value to it. You're conserving the cheetah habitat. It's a piece of the puzzle. There were other things that were involved, but that was... But this thing wasn't selling. And so the business problem really came about, well, why isn't it a competitive product in the marketplace? And looking at it, a lot of it had to do with the fact, again, here, you know, TJ's fire logs with the cheetah, bush block with the cheetah. Nobody knew this product. We went to the store, we talked to consumers. They didn't know what they were buying. They didn't understand it. What was it? They didn't necessarily think it was made of cheetah, but they couldn't understand what the connection to cheetahs was. So even that social consciousness wasn't coming through to consumers. It turns out the log was sold in a unit that was not really amenable. Consumers wanted more of it, not just a single log. So how it was being sold wasn't quite right. Where it was being positioned on the shelves in the stores turned out to be problematic. It was in a place where people's eyes weren't going to see it. And this seems like really small minutia, but this is the kind of thing that will really generate sales for a product. And if they generate sales, that means less time for the executive director to have to go out and fundraise. This is why we took it on, because it was this private sector approach to solving a bunch of social and environmental issues through a product or a service, but the fundamental issues that they were grappling with were business issues. And so if I just skip to my second to last slide here, which is, these are the questions that we're constantly asking companies to work on. It's not, do they understand necessarily what the social environmental issue is and how it's important, and you know, these other things that we'll think about in other domains. We're trying to get them, we understand what the social environmental problem is we're trying to attack. Now, what's the product or service that's going to address that? And in order for that product or service to be viable, just simply thinking of it isn't going to do it. It has to be competitive in the marketplace. Consumers have to want it. It has to be priced accordingly. It has to work. It has to speak to them. And so all of these different things, from cost structure to profitability analysis to market penetration and growth, those are the things that we really need to focus on if we're going to achieve the sustainable enterprise component. So I will stop there because I'm over.